I had just washed the bunches of vegetables under cold water, the drops of water still on my fingertips, when suddenly a warm breath blew gently on the back of my neck. John had been standing right behind me, his low voice ringing right next to my ear. "Let's try it once." "Okay." I froze. My hands were still clutching the bunch of vegetables, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The words were like a small spark, but they spread throughout my body. I didn't turn around. I didn't dare. But I could feel his presence hot, patient, and seductive. The small space of the kitchen suddenly felt too small. Or maybe the distance between us was too close. My name is Scarlett. A simple name, nothing special, just like my life. I never thought I would fall into a situation like this, a relationship that was wrong but enchanting. I was a freshman in college, just leaving my mother's embrace to step into a more independent life, but I still hadn't really grown up. My mother always said I was a good girl, obedient, never doing anything beyond the limit. But perhaps she did not know that deep down I also had desires, curiosities, and things I had never dared to touch. My life before was quite peaceful. I grew up with my mother. We depended on each other after my father left when I was young. My mother was a strong woman who worked hard to raise me. I never felt deprived of affection because my mother always gave me the best. But then, everything changed when my mother remarried. My stepfather was a successful man who seemed gentle and mature. I didn't have any bad feelings towards him, but I wasn't too close to him either. What bothered me the most wasn't him, but his stepson Michael. Michael was 2 years older than me. When my mother married my stepfather, he had just turned 20, and I was still just an 18-year-old girl. When I first met Michael, I was a little confused. He wasn't like the stepbrothers in the movies I'd seen, not cold, not distant. On the contrary, Michael had a warm smile, gentle but deep eyes. At that time, I reminded myself he is my brother, just my brother. But it was hard to keep our distance when we lived in the same house. Michael was not only handsome, but also had a special charm. He was tall, with the lean body of a workout buddy. Sometimes I'd catch him fresh out of the shower, water still clinging to his tanned skin. I hated myself for peeking, but I couldn't help but stare. I thought the feelings would fade with time, but I was wrong, because as time went on, I became more and more drawn into his presence, slowly but inexorably. I don't know exactly when my feelings for Michael began to change. Maybe it was the first time I met him, or maybe it was the little moments that accumulated over time, until by the time I realized it, it had grown into something beyond my control. At first, I tried to keep my distance. I told myself it was just a crush, a simple admiration for a seemingly perfect older brother. But it wasn't like the innocent crushes I'd had in high school. It's deeper, more powerful, and more dangerous. Things got worse when I began to realize Michael's attraction to me. I couldn't deny that he had a strange attraction, not only because of his appearance, but also because of the way he behaved. He was always gentle, thoughtful, naturally, without any pressure. I remember one time when I was sick. My mother was away. It was Michael who cooked porridge and took care of me all night. When I had a high fever, he put his hand on my forehead, his voice low and full of worry. I lay in bed, looking at him sitting next to me, and suddenly realized that my heart was pounding. But I still lied to myself that it was just gratitude. Then one day I accidentally saw Michael exercising in the living room. He was shirtless, sweat running down his firm muscles. Each movement was strong and full of life. I couldn't take my eyes off. I knew I shouldn't look, but the more I tried to look away, the more I was drawn to that image. Michael suddenly realized my presence. He stopped, wiped his sweat with a towel, and smiled. "What are you looking at?" I was startled. my heart pounding so hard I couldn't hide it. I stammered a hasty reply and ran back to my room, slamming the door behind me as if to block myself out. But even as I curled up under the covers, his image was still clear in my mind. After that day, I began to become more sensitive to Michael's presence. I noticed every little thing he did, the way he smiled, the way he looked at me, the way he accidentally touched my hand when he handed me something. Each time I felt like I was being electrocuted, but I didn't dare look him in the eye for too long. I didn't know if he noticed it or not, but one thing was certain: I was no longer in control. And so, it happened. That day passed like any other, nothing special, no warning signs. But by evening, things took a completely different turn. I don't remember exactly when everything started to change. Maybe it was when I walked into the kitchen and turned on the light, the pale white light flooding out, pulling me back to reality. Everything was as usual: the fresh ingredients in the basket, the sound of running water as I washed the vegetables, the cold air from the tile floor hitting my bare feet. My mother called, her voice urgent, saying she would be home late. My stepfather was nowhere to be seen either. That meant it was just me and Michael in the house. I turned on the faucet, washed the bunches of vegetables in my hands, the cool water running through my fingers, bringing me a little clarity from the chaotic thoughts in my head. But then, just as I was absorbed in my work, a warm breath brushed against the back of my neck. I was startled. Michael had been standing right behind me, so close that I could feel the heat from his body. Before I could turn around, his low voice rang out in my ear. Full of charm, let's try it once. Okay, I froze. My whole body stiffened, as if time had stopped. My fingers clenched the bunch of vegetables so tightly that my nails dug into my flesh, but I felt no pain. In that moment, all I could hear was my heart pounding madly in my chest, pounding against my eardrums. Try it. What did he mean? But I knew. The small kitchen space felt strangely stuffy. I swallowed, but my throat was dry. I wanted to turn to look at him, but I was afraid that if I made eye contact with him, I would lose control completely. Michael took his time. He stood there, so close I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. A mesmerizing patience. I should have refused. I should have turned back, pushed him away, and told him that everything I'd felt was a stupid mistake, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stood still, letting a strange feeling rise in my chest. Tension, temptation, and a little anticipation. Michael leaned in, the distance between us growing closer. I could feel his breath right next to my ear. And then, he said softly, "You want to try too, right?" The words were like a small spark that fell into the still lake inside me, and instantly, the fire flared up, consuming everything. I closed my eyes and let myself sink. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. I don't remember who made the first move. Maybe it was me, or maybe it was him. All I know is that when I turned around, Michael was standing in front of me, so close that I could see every detail of his face, his deep eyes, his burning gaze that seemed to burn me. I should have backed away. I should have kept my distance. But instead, I stood still, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Michael reached up and touched my cheek. I shivered. He was testing me, or maybe he was waiting to see if I would push him away. But I didn't do anything. I just stood there, feeling the warmth of his hand, the way his fingers brushed my skin. A seductive tenderness. And then, as if some invisible string between us finally snapped, the remaining distance was erased. Michael leaned down, his lips touching mine. I don't know when I closed my eyes. All I know is that when his breath enveloped me, when his lips were gentle but also full of desire, I could no longer think. The small kitchen seemed to disappear. It was just me and him. The first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if he was still waiting for me to refuse. But I didn't refuse. I couldn't. And when I responded, everything seemed to explode. Michael hugged me, pulling me closer to him. I felt his strong arms, felt his heart beating as fast as mine. Heat spread throughout my body, burning every vein in my body. I could no longer think. Morality, boundaries, everything was thrown to the back of my mind. All I knew was that I wanted him. I craved him, just like he craved me. And then we crossed the line. When it was all over, I lay there, gasping for air, my heart still pounding in my chest. The kitchen was darker than I had expected, the only light being a dim lamp that cast messy shadows on the walls. It was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Michael was still beside me, his eyes never leaving me for a second. His gaze was no longer just gentle, but something deeper, a mixed emotion that was hard to name. I didn't know what to say. I should feel guilty. I should feel regret. But it was scary. I didn't feel that way at all. The only thing I felt right now was a guilty excitement, a dangerous feeling, but also so sweet that I didn't want to let go. Michael reached out and gently stroked my cheek, his low voice echoing in the quiet space, "Do you regret it?" I looked at him, and I didn't answer, because I didn't know either. I thought that after that night, everything would go back to normal, that Michael and I could pretend that nothing had happened. But I was wrong. The next morning, when I walked out of the room, Michael was standing in the kitchen, like every other day. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt, pouring coffee into a cup. But when our eyes met, I knew that everything had changed. Confusion flooded me immediately. I wanted to turn and run into the room, as if that would erase everything that had happened. But my feet wouldn't move. Michael put down his coffee cup and walked toward me. My heart beat faster. He stopped right in front of me, too close for me to pretend that nothing had happened between us. I didn't know what to say. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. And then Michael smiled, a meaningful smile. He leaned over, close to my ear, and whispered a simple sentence, "Will you be in the kitchen again tonight?" I don't know how long I held my breath. When Michael left, I stood there, my heart racing, my head spinning. I knew I had to stop. I knew this was wrong. But the scariest thing was, I didn't want to stop, and so it continued. The accidental but meaningful encounters, the glances exchanged across the dinner table, the furtive moments in the dark when the rest of the family had fallen asleep. We knew we were playing with fire, but neither of us wanted to put it out, and we couldn't go on like this forever. I don't know who said it first. Maybe it was Michael, maybe it was me. But at some point, we both understood that if we kept going like this, everything would fall apart sooner or later. Those days of living in tension and fear became a part of us. We didn't dare to go public, didn't dare to let anyone know, always had to be wary of every look, every word. Just a little carelessness and our secret could be exposed. I don't know how much longer I can take it, and so we decided to leave. But the biggest problem was that we were still in school. We couldn't just leave and go. We both understood that if we wanted to leave, we had to have a good reason, a concrete plan, otherwise our parents would never accept it. Michael was the one who planned it first. He was always more calm and rational than me. He researched universities in other cities, the majors we could pursue, part-time jobs we could both do to support ourselves. He prepared everything carefully, as if there was even a loophole. Everything would fall apart immediately. Then Michael said to me, "If you don't want to, we won't do this." But I knew, like him and me, we couldn't go back to the way things were. We had gone too far, had given up too much to continue living in torment. And so, we decided to talk to our parents. I can't remember exactly how I felt sitting in front of my mother, trying to stay calm to express my wishes. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't let her know the real reason I wanted to leave. I want to go to college in another city. I want to be more independent. My mother looked at me, her eyes full of doubt. Why do you suddenly want to do that? There are good schools here too. I had prepared an answer. I think a change of environment will be good for me. Besides, Michael wants it too. I glanced at Michael, who was sitting next to me. He was as calm as ever, but I could feel the tension in his every move. My stepfather looked at Michael. You want to go too? Michael nodded. Yes, I think a new environment will give you more opportunities. No one said anything for a long time. I could feel the tension in the room. My mother looked at me, then at Michael. I knew she was suspicious, but I also knew she had no reason to stop me. My stepfather spoke first. If you two really want to do this, then prove that you can take care of yourselves. I don't mind, but I want you two to have a clear plan. Michael nodded, as if he had expected this. I understand. I found a part-time job, and I will try to keep up with my studies. I quickly added, I will try too. I just need your support. My mother still seemed uneasy. She looked at me for a long time, as if trying to find something in my eyes. But finally, she sighed. If this is what you want, I won't stop you. But you have to promise me, if anything happens, you have to tell me right away. I nodded, even though I knew I wouldn't be able to keep that promise. Because once I left, I couldn't come back. We left on a day at the end of summer. Everything happened faster than I thought. Just a few days after the conversation with my parents, we packed our things, arranged our accommodation, and prepared for our new life. I didn't have much to bring, just a suitcase of clothes, a few books, and a few small souvenirs. My mother hugged me before I got in the car. Take care, okay? I nodded, forcing a smile. But deep down, I felt like I was leaving behind a big part of my life. Michael held my hand as we left the house. He didn't say anything, just squeezed it lightly, as if to remind me that we were together. I thought that when I left, I would feel relieved. I thought that with no one to stop me, no more hiding, I would feel happy. But when we arrived at our new home, a small apartment in an unfamiliar apartment complex, I realized that I wasn't as happy as I thought I would be. The months of living in secrecy, in fear, in prohibition, had created a kind of intensity that I had never experienced before. That wrong but exciting feeling was gone now. No one was stopping us anymore, but I didn't feel the same excitement. I began to wonder, was this really love, or just a temporary infatuation? Michael was still very good to me. He took care of me, worried about me, did everything to keep me from suffering. I know he loves me, but deep inside, there's a little voice that keeps saying, did I make the right choice? I miss my mom. I miss my old house. I miss my old life when everything was simple and peaceful. I miss the days when I didn't have to worry about the future, didn't have to ask questions that I didn't have answers to. But now, I can't turn back. I've chosen this path. And whether it's right or wrong, I have to keep going. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll regret it one day, but I want to hear from everyone. If it were you, what would you do if you were in my situation? Would you dare to give up everything to pursue your feelings? Or would you choose to stop before it's too late? Leave a comment below. I really want to know. Has anyone ever gone through the same thing as me? And if so, what choice did you make? Thank you for watching the whole video. If you find it interesting, don't hesitate to leave a comment number 1. If you are not really satisfied, leave a comment number 2 so we can improve further. See you in the next videos.